with a very large wave of skippable banners we got recently, I was sort of curious to how the game is performing on what the, company actually cares about, which is how much money they're raking in. I was very curious because we got so many banners that are completely skippable. How is it performing compared to past months, and especially last month with the new collab, the Mushoku Tensei collab? So we got numbers for April, and we'll be looking at them. I have it on screen right now. We'll be looking at them and comparing why number go up or number go down. So let's start with October. I'm gonna address the red at the end in a bit, but let's start with October and talk what released and why money was made and what to expect. If they're looking to keep releasing these god-awful banners, if the game's just shut down because they're making such little money. Now, still, the money they're making is above, necessary to maintain the game. And obviously, when they're making the most, which is like 6-4, you see, like JP and Global are separate there. That's 1 month in January that they made 10 million. That's way, 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 way above what they need. Way, way, way above. So there's no worries on that. And if Orange comes out and they actually, hire developers to work on the game again, that number can go up even more. But let's discuss what released and why number go up and down. So October, you can see JP 2.7, Global 4. 4 is still a huge number for October. What released in October for Global? So JP, right? October was Easton of Authority. So this bad boy, I will tell you, did not bring in the big V-Bucks. But what happened was, in end of September, the 29th of September, Festival Merlin came out. And a little bit of the sales bled in. Festival Merlin was weirdly popular. She wasn't great at launch, and Philo came out. But she wasn't great at launch, but she was weirdly popular. And you can see by the numbers on Global, because Merlin released in October for Global. And she was huge success. 4 mil, same number as November, which November was even bigger. So big banner was Festival Merlin. And then we had Easton. She didn't bring the big V-Bucks, but 2.7 for JP can be attributed to the Shield Hero collab, which wasn't the biggest thing ever, but it was definitely something. It was 4 new characters, so Wales had to spend way more than usual, and that usually brings in way more money. At the end of October, 27th of October, we got the Shield Hero collab, and again, the first day of the banner, that's when the big V-Bucks come in. All right, that's when the whales clean the shop to 6-6 the character, and after that, there's some bleeding in. Like even in November, there's some bleeding in from the Shield Hero collab still, because the banner was still live. But again, most of the money is spent the first day by the whales, and then mostly like the dolphins and the lesser spenders might spend money after the fact still. But first day, that's the big number. So that was that. November, right? What happened in November? I mean, end of November released just some, just Ultimate Escanor, So you can see the number much larger, 3.8 for JP, 4 mil for Global. Now it's interesting because November actually had Escanor still towards the end. So the number was still really high up for that, but it was the 29th of November. So it was like at the tail end, that's money only from the whales, that 4 mil. The fact that Merlin and Escanor made practically the same amount of money on Global is kind of nuts to me. But, when it comes to a festival banner, let's say I'm a whale, right? And I see Merlin is a character that needs to go first to work. She needs to go first. I will 6-6 her because of CC, right? And 6-6ing a festival unit is the same price of 6-6ing a different festival unit. So I can see a lot of players that play Grand Cross are free to play because the game is very generous with gems compared to other games. and that larger free-to-play player base doesn't account for that money. There were definitely way more players playing when Askener came out than Merlin, but the spenders spent the same amount. Same cannot be said for next month, but in November still, for the releases, right, there were Demon Kusok, which cannot tell you that shook up the number all too much. Demon Kusok was, he wasn't terrible. He's good. Like, he's a meta character, but it's not like he's hype. You know what I mean? So, not much there. Now, December can be easily attributed to, this bad boy. Meliodases are the ones that rake in the big V-Bucks. Askenor is my personal favorite and the personal favorite of a lot of people. But the main character will always be the main character, right? He is the one that will bring in the most people, bring in the most money. So it makes sense. Throughout the rest of December, there wasn't much, but, I'm actually looking. Valenti, Red Valenti, and then we had the Blue Liz. Now, all the money on JP right there, that 4.8, was Melee, for sure. But funnily enough, Global didn't have him in December, did they? Oh, no, they did. Did Global... I'm actually going to have to check this real quick. I was actually checking now. Purgatory Melee did release in January for Global. So the number for January is the Melee number, the 6 mil. 5 mil is definitely a bleeding in from Askenor as well. But I'm surprised it still was so much. So actually, yeah, 5 mil, there was some bleeding in from Askenor. So the 4 and 5, Askenor was just so huge, right? And then Melee was even bigger. So it makes sense. January for JP, though, Mono and Freya. I can see why 4 mil still. Freya was pretty hype to an extent because she's hot. That's about it. And Wales did feel forced to summon for her for being a Ragnarok buffer. But at the time, we didn't even know if she was a Demonic Beast character because, the relic was not out yet, so probably would have been a bigger number if it was the case. Wales would have easily 6-6'd her for that. So now starting the decline there, 2.4 and 2. After January, which wasn't, all that in terms of all the Purgatory Melee, right? The other two banners. February, that's when, it started. I am a little shocked at how much lower it is, but still. In February, we got the New Winged King, which a lot of you probably don't even remember he came out. It was this guy. Who actually remembers this guy came out? Exactly. But most shockingly, February is when Mael came out. Now, coming out of Purgatory Melee and Askenor, I can see why this banner didn't make money. People were probably tired of summoning for festivals already. It was 3 back-to-back months of festivals, essentially, right? So, in a way, it makes sense why the banner wasn't so successful. And, to be honest, before people found out Goddess Liz, Mael looked pretty average. Now we know with Goddess Liz is a very annoying character to face, but he's still not number 1. Number 1 is Melee. Number 1 is Purgatory Melee. Number 1 team in the game is Demons, right? So even to this day, this guy isn't meta. So I can see why the number was not looking so great. And in terms of release, Mael did release at the last day of February for Global as well. But again, that was last day. There was definitely some bleeding in. Mael was way more successful on Global, you can see by the 4 mil of the next month, than it was on JP. Way more successful. And I'm not surprised, actually. Mael is way more popular on the English and Spanish side of the game, or the fandom, I guess, than it is on the Japanese side. Way more. You can see the huge difference. 4 mil on Global, and then in March it was 1.4 on JP. Which you gotta remember, right? JP is a much smaller player base, but they are much more inclined to spend than Global players are in terms of of average number of population, right? Now March was a funny month. We got Green Ludociel, easy skip, Red Megelda, which was an easy skip as well. I'm not gonna look for her. And Blue Roxy. Now Blue Roxy was an interesting release because people were actually pretty excited for Blue Roxy. She released at the end of the month, and it was definitely not successful on JP. 1.4 did not help that month, right? On Global, she released actually in April. So the number you're seeing for 2 mil for Global is actually from Roxy. Roxy was pretty popular, all things considered, on Global. And it makes sense, she's hot, so. Now the big one. April. April was last month. And again, for Global, Global had Roxy, but also had Red Goddess Liz, which... Lamau. JP, on the other hand, had some bleeding in from Roxy, right? It was like towards the end, essentially the last day of the month, second to last day. We had Goddess Liz, but we also had Mushoku Tensei. And Mushoku Tensei, like I said, first day, that's when the big V-Bucks come in, but there's still some bleeding in. Mushoku Tensei released on the 27th of April. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 days. 4 days to make the number go up. And it's 1.3 mil for April. April again, Goddess Liz in this collab, not a great combination. Very unhyped collab on JP, very unhyped collab on Global. Global is not seeing the numbers from this collab yet because the collab actually released, what, on the 2nd of March? Or sorry, May. 2nd of May. So only next month we're going to see the global performance of this collab. But on JP, massive failure. massive failure. I'm not saying that the latest collab we had, the Shield Hero, was that much bigger because, to be honest, again, that number we saw, 2.7, had quite a bit of bleeding in from the Festival Merlin we had, which was oddly popular. There was some bleeding in. But even with the bleeding in, it's still too far of a number for me to say that it was honestly not at least like half of the hype of Shield Hero, which wasn't very hype to begin with. Shield Hero honestly just had better units as well. Roxy, this character right here, is okay. If you are a whale and having insanely high stats, during this week of the high stat for collab, she's alright, right? But as soon as demons come in, she's over. As soon as demons can actually play the game again, on ungeared, she's over. Ghislaine's nice, I like her. But Rudius is kind of mid, while the Shield Hero characters, all 3 of the PvP characters were good, especially Philo. I don't know. Really odd choice. I am curious to see the numbers for Anniversary, if they will trend back up, or if the player base is done with their bullshit, their lesser collaboration, lesser events, right? This month and last month were so dead with nothing to do. I was so bored I started playing that. You know how many hours I have in Destiny 2 right now? I started playing the game like 4 months ago and I have like 600 hours. I was so bored, right? So hopefully it trends back up. I can see it, but again, the game is not shutting down. The game's still making enough money. Just a rough patch, man.